Hello my friends and welcome back to another video. Today's video is probably not going to surprise you because if you get on BookTube lately, these videos are everywhere. Everyone is doing these and I am also doing them because they're really fun and I am enjoying watching everyone's lists. We are talking about the most surprising books I read in 2022. Most of these books are on this list because they were either labeled genres that I don't typically tend to gravitate towards, or I just really didn't think that I was going to enjoy them, and I was pleasantly surprised. Like the title says, these are the most surprising books of 2022 for me that I personally read this year. So without further ado, let's get into the list. First up is a book that I bought because I felt like I was missing out and everyone was talking about it, and that is Finley Donovan is Killing It by Elle Cosimano. I truly just did not think I was going to enjoy this book, and I really don't know why. I don't know why I had that idea in my head. This is like a comedy, murder, mystery. This book is about a woman who accidentally gets mistaken for a contract killer, and for some reason that just didn't stick out to me. I knew everyone loved it, I knew everyone was talking about it, and I don't know, I think it's the comedy that threw it off for me. Not that I'm opposed to comedy in books, it's just when something is supposed to be so funny, I get nervous that I'm gonna not think it's that funny or that fun or that cool. So I think I was just really nervous that I was not going to have the same feelings as everyone else about this book. But of course, I was pleasantly surprised. I thought this was really fun and actually very funny. I was laughing at this book, which I think is a huge accomplishment for a book to actually make you laugh out loud, because it's kind of hard to do. Some jokes just don't translate very well, and this worked extremely well. There is a little bit of romance in it, which also worked in my favor. I do love romance, so I am really happy that I gave this one a chance because I would have missed out if I hadn't given it the chance that it needed, and I do want to pick up the second book. The next book is one that kind of pushed me into my romance era. It pushed me into reading more romance books this year, and I just fell head over heels in love with this book. And I know it's super popular and it's probably a very like typical obvious book, but for me, I just really didn't think I was going to enjoy it, and that is The Love Hypothesis by Ali Hazelwood. I really didn't think I was going to like this, and I don't know why really. I think it's because they're scientists, and for some reason when I read scientists, I was like, oh, they're gonna be way too smart for me. They're gonna be talking about things that I don't understand. It's gonna go completely over my head, and I don't want to read a really complicated romance. I just want a fun romance. Everything I was hesitant about was not true. This was a really fun romance book. I know so many people love it. I also know so many people hate this one. Personally, it worked really well for me. It's a fake dating trope, which is one that I just absolutely love in a romance book. I love fake dating so much. It's my favorite, and I just think it's so funny, even though it is predictable, which I mean, rom-coms are pretty predictable, I'm not gonna lie, but for me it's just it's a predictability that I enjoy every single time, so that's why I think I keep going back. And truly, this book brought me out of a slump. It sent me down the path of romance and reading more romance, and it was just such an enjoyable experience, and I loved every second of this book. I really did. It was so good. It was an easy 5-star read, and I'm just happy that I gave it a chance. Next up is a YA horror, and that is The Woods Are Always Watching by Stephanie Perkins. Now, I didn't think I was gonna dislike this book because it's YA. I actually thought I was going to dislike this book while I was reading it. This book also has some not so great reviews on Goodreads, so I was a little nervous, to be fair, when I started this book. This is about two friends that just recently graduated high school and they go on a camping trip together to celebrate, and things get bad. So the whole time I was reading this book, I was like, oh my god, this is not what I wanted it to be. This is not what I expected it to be. This is just going in a direction that I don't care for. I swear to you, the whole time I was reading the book, the whole time, this book had me convinced it was one type of story. And then all of a sudden, it takes a 180. And I was so excited by that 180. I was so excited by how this book turned, and it really surprised me. I really enjoyed this book. I like YA horror a lot. I know a lot of people don't, but I do find it very fun. I just like picking it up and giving it a try, seeing if I enjoy it, you know, that kind of thing. I like to experiment with YA horror. And for me, this one, it worked well. It worked well. It worked out in my favor, and I really enjoyed it. Next up, we have The One by John Mars. This book was actually part of a series I did where I read booktuber friends of mine books that they recommend to me and see if I like them. And this was recommended to me by Nakia from Nakia's Hideaway. And this book was so good. So it's a little bit of a sci-fi thriller, which again, I was a little bit nervous about because sci-fi and me, we don't really get along. I was a little bit worried. I was a little hesitant, but I was like, you know what? Give it a chance. You never know. This is about a DNA test that puts you with your soulmate. And so at first I was like, this reminds me of the YA dystopian books I used to read in high school. So I was a little bit, you know, a little bit iffy because I was like, is this gonna remind me too much of my high school days? This thriller is so twisty and unexpected and just wild. I mean, every chapter, I was just mind blown. I had no idea what to expect. Every chapter, something new was thrown at me, and I just couldn't stop reading. My eyes were just glued to this book. I couldn't put it down. I devoured it in record time because I just needed to know what was going on. And every chapter ends on a cliffhanger, so you can't stop. It's literally an addictive book because you cannot stop reading. And when I finished it, I was just like, my mind is blown. This was incredible, and it's just one of the twistiest thrillers I have ever read. You really cannot guess what's going to happen, and I love that so much. This next one might have been one of the most shocking and most surprising out of this list, I'll be honest, and that is A Dowry of Blood by S.T. Gibson. So this is a reimagining of Dracula told from Dracula's bride's perspective. I was like, okay, Erin, you don't like vampire stories. You don't. You're not interested in them. You don't like them. And I was like, you're right. I don't like them. When everyone talks about a book, I have to see what I'm missing out on. So I really went into this expecting like, a vampire story. Woohoo! Yay! But this book really actually made me take a step back and think, do I actually like vampire stories? Because after this book, I swear, I had been reading more vampire stories and getting into them and buying more vampire books, and I was like, maybe you actually just didn't have the right vampire stories and you just thought you didn't like vampire books. And now, after this book, I have convinced myself that I was just reading the wrong books, and I actually do like vampire stories, just certain ones. So this book really did change my mind. It did, and it was written very beautifully. Not necessarily the flowery writing that I think is so beautiful and so like luscious. It's just what the words are saying. Yes, the words are beautiful, but it's actually the meaning behind the words that I think is truly beautiful about this book, and I really enjoyed it. I can see why everyone liked it, and it It surprised the heck out of me. Next up is Rosemary's Baby by Ira Levin. This is a classic, and classics and me don't really get along. I tend to find the writing of classics a little too dense for me personally, for how I like to read. I feel like my brain doesn't really comprehend classics sometimes. When I have to think too hard while I'm reading, it takes away the fun, and I just end up not having a good time. So I really went into Rosemary's Baby thinking that I was going to hate it, because the only classic I've ever really liked is Frankenstein. So I will admit, I went into this thinking that I was going to hate it. I really feel like this was a very easy read, and for me that's really important most of the time, just because if I know I'm getting into a more literary book, I can set my, my mind in a certain way. But with most books, I don't really want to have to think like that. So for me, this book was just so easy and just such a pleasant experience. And even though I already knew how Rosemary's Baby ended, because I am familiar with the story and I have seen the movie, so everything wasn't too surprising for me. I was very into this book. I was shocked, I was floored, I was flabbergasted, and I'm sitting there like, Erin, you know this book. You know how this plot goes. It was so surprising to me that I could know so much about the plot and the story and still feel so invested and engaged. And so I was just really happy to read Rosemary's Baby and actually enjoy it and not feel like I was too dumb or that I wasn't comprehending it properly, and that was just such a nice surprise. This next book I read for the Halloweekend readathon, and that is A History of Wild Places by Shay Earnshaw. This was a host favorite, and this was Michelle's favorite, Michelle from Michelle's Library, and I really didn't expect to like it this much. I thought I might like some of it, but again, I was fooled by the genre tags on Goodreads. This is tagged as kind of like a fantasy mystery with some magical realism. I'll be honest, magical realism and fantasy. Fantasy is a whole genre that just scares me most of the time when I see it tagged, but magical realism isn't something that I overly enjoy a lot of the time, just because it does feel a little bit too unrealistic for me, and I am someone that tends to like realistic horror, realistic thrillers. So for me, magical realism can be a little bit too much. I will say this thriller does go off kind of into an area that is a little bit, fantastical and a little unrealistic, I'll be honest. But I had a lot of fun with this. I really did. I didn't expect to like it as much as I did. I thought the writing was beautiful. I thought the atmosphere was beautiful. I thought the plot was really, really well done. I didn't predict anything in this book, which is really a big deal for me. I don't like when I can predict things, and for it to just not feel too predictable was just amazing. It felt like I was reading The Village, which is a horror movie that I really do enjoy, and because it reminded me so much of The Village, I actually really loved it more because of that. I know a lot of people weren't really happy with that kind of aspect, but I really was, and I thought it was a lot of fun. It just turned out to be something that I wouldn't have picked for myself, but it became something that I really, really had fun with and really enjoyed. This next thriller is a wild, crazy thriller. It is Good Rich People by Eliza Jane Brazier. This book is campy. It is over the top. It is outrageous. It's crazy. It's silly. It's just a lot, but it's really, really fun, and it's really, really entertaining. I read If I Disappear by this author, I believe, I don't know when I read it, to be honest, I don't remember. And I wasn't the biggest fan. I didn't really like the writing that much, and I felt like the plot just wasn't exactly what I wanted it to be. But I wanted to give the author another chance with this one, and this one sounded It just sounded like rich people drama, and I love a good rich people drama thriller. I think it's funny. I think it's just hilariously over the top, and I saw a lot of negative reviews about this one, so I was really nervous, but I decided to give it a chance. I thought the cover was really, really pretty, and I just wanted to check it out for myself. And it was just a good time. If you don't take it too seriously and you're just reading for entertainment, you're just reading to be entertained, to have fun, and you know it's gonna be ridiculous, you know that it's going to just be really, really campy, I think you'll have fun with it, because I did. Was it a perfect thriller? No. But did it surprise me in the best way possible and make me have a really good time while I was reading it? Absolutely, and that's all I could have asked for. This is another book that I listened to the tags on Goodreads and put this book off for so long because I was worried. I was really worried about it, and that is The Year of the Witching by Alexis Henderson. Now, this is a witchy horror, but it's also labeled as like fantasy and historical fiction, which fantasy again just scares me. I always get worried when I see fantasy because I just don't tend to enjoy fantasy. And then historical fiction, I'm not opposed to reading. It's just that most of the time it feels a little bit too draggy for me while I'm reading it. So I was worried. I was hesitant. I was nervous, and I did have a lot of people telling me that I was gonna like it more than I thought I was, and everyone was right. This is a YA, but I will say that I wasn't really noticing that. While I was reading, it wasn't something that I was picking up. I wasn't saying, yep, that's very YA. Oh, this feels so YA. I wasn't really thinking about that. I was just so invested in the plot and the characters and the story that it didn't really faze me. I wasn't thinking about it. And I think that's a very successful YA novel when you're not kind of disregarding certain things while you're reading it because it is YA, or you're like, that explains why this is written this way because it's YA. You know, I think Alexis Henderson has a really beautiful way of storytelling, and I really enjoy her writing a lot. I thought this was just such a well done witchy story. I really think if you like Slewfoot by Brom, you'll really enjoy this one as well. And that's all I wanted it to be, was just a good witchy horror story, and I was so happy that that's what this turned out to be. The last book in this list is one of my favorite books of the year. I don't know if I'm going to put it on both lists. I haven't decided yet, but that is The Sundown Motel by Simone St. James. And the only reason this really surprised me is because a lot of people that I know did not like this book. A lot of people were disappointed in it. A lot of people said that it was mismarketed and that it was boring and it was just not what they wanted it to be. And so I was very nervous about this book. I decided to get it as my book of the month pick one month, and I was like, you know what? Let's give it a try. Who knows? I had never read anything by Simone St. James yet, and I had a 50-50 shot. I was like, I'm either gonna love this or I'm gonna hate this, and thank goodness I absolutely loved this book. It is a dual timeline. It's about missing people and like solving a mystery, and those are things that I really love in books. I find them so fascinating, and this was just so fun. I couldn't put it down. I was invested. I know a lot of people didn't like the main character. I know that a lot of people were annoyed with the dual timeline because they felt like it was really repetitive. For me, it worked really well, and I just loved every second. I was really invested and engaged in this story, and at the end I was just like, wow, I love it. I love this book. I love it so much. So this is definitely one book that I was really happy and surprised by, because I'm just so glad I didn't hate it because it sounded like a book I was gonna really love. So I'm just so happy it worked in my favor, and it made me find out that I really love Simone St. James as a writer as well, which is just such a good feeling to have another author that you really love buying from. Alright my friends, those are the 10 most surprising books that I read in 2022. I'm so happy about these books. You have no idea. I'm just so happy that I ended up liking them. Let me know what the most surprising book you read in 2022 was. I'd love to know, and this is the first in a few videos similar to this one. I have a few more planned. Obviously, the best books of 2022 will be out. It'll probably be the last video I do because I'm still not sure on that list. I haven't made my final tally yet. I'm kind of holding off because I'm not sure which books are my favorite yet. So if you're excited for those videos and you enjoyed this video, please give me a thumbs up. It lets me know that you enjoy this kind of content. That way I can keep providing you with this kind of content. Feel free to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and we can become friends, talk about books, horrifying books, thrilling books, romance books, manga, all that good fun stuff. And with that being said, I hope you are having a great day, night, morning, afternoon, wherever you are, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.